In the 1980s, a string of disappearances began plaguing Indiana until a body discovered in a ditch spurred the formation of a task force. This group began investigating the string of murders, but it wasn't until years later that it became clear there was a serial killer on the loose. Today, we discuss the disturbing crimes of the I-70 Strangler. This is Red Web. Welcome back, Task Force, to another episode of Red Web, the podcast all about unsolved mysteries, true crime, and the supernatural. I'm your resident mystery enthusiast, Trevor Collins, and joining me hearing this case for the very first time, Alfredo Diaz.
There's something a little terrifying about a person that just an intimate with a person that wants to just strangle you with a bare hand.
Dude, right? That's a crime of passion. You got to look somebody in the eyes when you're doing that.
Yeah, that's just like someone wants to see your eyes pop out of your head type thing.
Yuck.
That being said, though, I feel like they're left very vulnerable. I don't know if they're going for my throat. I'm going for their eyes with my hands. You know what I mean?
Oh, I see.
You know?
You draw them in. Yeah.
It's like, oh no, he's going for my throat. I'm going to poke your eyeballs out now.
Yeah, this case is wild. For a few personal reasons that we'll explore throughout the episode, because I'm an Indiana native and I'm very intimately acquainted with a lot of these locations personally, but also on a broader arena, we'll kind of get into what you're talking about, because yeah, it does feel like this person would be really close, that you could fight back in some way. But again, we're talking about a very sinister individual who has an MO. And part of that MO is leaving their victim a little defenseless. We do have, thankfully, some survivors from this individual who have, because of that, helped crack the case a little bit. I will say, playing my hand, this one is as close as resolved as this show kind of gets.
Oh, wow. Okay.
Yeah. But of course, it isn't a closed case on a technicality. We'll explore that. But for this one, it is true crime, a lot of sensitive topics in play, so I want to go ahead and point that out in the description if that's something you'd like to see. But as we dive into this case, I want to give a huge shout out to our Patreon members over at patreon.com/redweb. The number one way to support us, Fredo. You get all sorts of goodies. You get this podcast ad-free, and we like to rain down bonus content, little looks behind the scenes, teases, and Christian, your mom had some paranormal activity discovered.
Wild.
Handed that over to Patreon members. But we have It's Glitched, DV Ravenworth, and of course our monthly squonk shoutouts of G, Tucker Did It, Andy Schrock, Gavin Day, and Sabrina Hall, to name a few. Thank you all so much, and the task force supporting us. And a few other shoutouts. I mean, this Friday, it is the season of the holidays. This is our last merch drop for the year. November 22nd, we're going to release what we're calling this stealth merch design. It's kind of this blueprinty kind of capsule stealth energy. I don't know. It was these really cool designs that we had cooked up in the past, and we're finally able to release them, and I'm super excited about it. We're also prototyping some other merch that has this black on black design to see if that's going to work. This kind of shiny black material.
Oh, dude, I love that. I love the black on black.
It's so clean, but we're gonna see if that can work, and if it does, it'll be in the store over at store.redwebpod.com.
So go and get yourself dripped out, okay? Get it while it's hot. And yes, we do mean hot. So if you order earlier, it will burn your fingertips. So that way you will not have, what is it?
Blisters? Oh, fingertips.
You won't have fingerprints. Yeah, you won't have fingerprints. I don't know why. I said fingertips and I couldn't stop saying fingertips in my head. And I was like, no, not fingertips. We're burning off their fingertips. No, prints. But we'll burn out your fingerprints for you. It's a 2-for-1 service. So get it while it's piping hot. If you get it later, it will be cold. It will not have the same effect.
Right. And your fingerprints will be all over that merch. We'll track you down.
All over.
Listen, on Subfloor 71, we have that shiny silver orb that Will Smith grabs in Men in Black. So, if you want to go voluntarily just melt down those fingertips, and I do mean the fingertips, ours is not sanctioned.
No.
It's a little hotter.
Just don't hold it for too long. There's a sweet spot and there's a danger spot, and that gap is 0.2 milliseconds. So good luck.
You better be an F1 driver with a reaction time like that. But also a huge shout out over to the Patreon members, because if you're elite tier and higher, you do get a 15% discount code every single month for the store. So a little thank you for helping support us directly. And of course, it's the holiday season. There's a lot of things coming up. We'll keep you posted as these dates arrive. But next week, it is Thanksgiving. We have our bonus content coming out where we're going to explore. I'm going to walk the team through a very interesting cryptid. That's going to be, we're going to leave the rest as a surprise for you guys.
Okay.
But it's very timely to the holidays. So if you like Squonk, I think you're going to freak out about this one.
It's going to be some weird little like elf creature, bro. Some dumb thing. I don't know, man.
Yeah. And then, oh man, I'm very excited for December because we got a lot coming to Patreon. More on that as December approaches. But again, thank you all so much for supporting the show. It's the way we keep doing this. It's the way we're able to continue exploring mysteries. But with that said, Fredo, let me take you back all the way to the 1980s. A little bit kind of in my backyard, weirdly enough. It's kind of creepy, this whole episode. But let me take you back to July 1983. A task force was formed to investigate the unusually frequent murders of multiple young gay men in central Indiana and Ohio. Now, according to the Indianapolis Star, the group started their investigations after 22-year-old Michael Riley was found strangled to death and undressed in a drainage ditch in Hancock County, just outside of Indianapolis, on June 5th, 1983. Now, he had last been seen leaving a Broad Ripple nightclub known as the Vogue Theater with an unknown man just a few days prior on May 28th. Now, if you'll indulge me, Task Force and Fredo, my experience is so weird because I've been to the Vogue.
Oh.
My parents have been to the Vogue. Broad Ripple is not too far away from where I grew up, so it's a very widely known area. And so researching this entire topic was extra eerie, just having the grounded experience. And now I know kind of more about the task force when we talk about a cryptid in Iowa or like a crime that happened in Belgium. And then we have task force members come out and go, that's where I live. I understand now that very eerie feeling of having something unknown or something sinister happen literally right in your backyard.
Yeah, it's something about like I've walked those grounds, you know what I mean?
Dude.
Where you could literally like point and go right there on that like chunk of sidewalk. It's a little too surreal.
Yeah, very surreal. So Michael Riley was the 8th in a string of murders of gay men, but the 2nd that had been strangled. So at this time, police believed that they were dealing with 2 different killers, again as reported by the Indianapolis Star. At least 3 other young men and boys had been found strangled in rural parts of central Indiana starting in 1980. Of course, with hindsight, we know that this is now part of the same run of a killer, but I can't properly explain like through this actual time period. As this is unfolding, I feel like the police are reluctant to explore this as a serial killer because a few odds and ends are missing, or it isn't until you have a 1,000-foot view, a holistic view of this case, that you start to see all the different patterns.
See, that's rough because like it's the fine line and balance of like you don't want to jump the gun, you know?
Sure, yeah.
And really, it's kind of hard to walk it back, right? If the police are like, oh, it's this, they're connected. And all of a sudden it's like, oh, actually, we got that wrong. They're not.
Yeah.
And that's kind of rough. So I do understand that point a little bit.
Right. Like you don't want to draw conclusions that could inadvertently allow someone else to go free. Because what if it was 2 people and not 1, you know?
True.
But when the task force is formed, suffice to say, they're not looking for one specific person because of the inconsistency of the locations these individuals were found. And these 3 young men and boys that I'm referring to were specifically Michael Petrie, who was 15, Maurice Taylor, who was 23, and Delvoyd Lee Baker, who was only 14. Now, eventually, this killer became known as the I-70 Strangler. I-70 is a major east-west highway that passes through the entire state of Indiana, stretches way over into Ohio, all the way over to St. Louis. It's a very well-known interstate. But I do want to say, I don't want to, God, this highway. I don't want it to be confused with an entirely other unsolved case known as the I-70 Killer, which was, interestingly enough, in a similar time frame in the spring of 1992. I believe 6 store clerks had gone missing or were murdered somewhere in the Midwest. A whole other case.
That's like what? Damn, like what do you do? You know what I mean?
Move away from I-70, I'll tell you that.
Yeah. It's also unfortunate too because it's just like, I don't know, your job kind of just puts you in a dangerous position, you know? You're just readily available in the middle of the night at all times.
Yeah, you're just like, I'm just a store clerk at this place in rural, Midwest, Indiana, wherever it might be.
Right.
And someone decides, yep, that's my target.
Damn.
That's a spooky world sometimes.
I know. It's terrifying.
Yeah. Now, it's unclear how many victims died to the Strangler, but at least 11 victims had much in common. They were young men who met their killer at gay bars in Indianapolis, and each of them had been left strangled near or along I-70 in things like rivers, drainage ditches, and other rural spots. I-70 does have quite a long stretch that goes through farmlands and kind of lesser populated areas. I believe it goes from Indianapolis straight over to Dayton, Ohio, and I'll tell you, I've been on I-70 many times because of that. After 1991, the I-70 Strangler killings appeared to stop since bodies were no longer found along I-70. But gay men were still going missing in the area, so again, by this point, there's two schools of thought. Is this a serial killer, or is this just an unfortunate string of maybe two or more individuals with different MOs, what have you? We don't really know a whole lot, but we do know people are disappearing.
But I mean, if they're all getting strangled, though.
Well, by 91, the bodies stop appearing, but the people are still disappearing.
Oh.
But I'm with you. If they're all getting strangled, I'm starting to put together like,
Yeah.
okay, this might be one guy here, could be a copycat in the mix. It gets really fuzzy.
I've come to realize that's the annoying thing about just doing this show and then like murder mysteries in general, is that there's always, you always got to think of the theory that maybe it's copycat. And I hate that. I hate
There's
it. I don't
always-
know
yeah.
Why? Like, I know like things don't get solved, but like, I just hate the thought of like, well, it could be someone just copying the person. I'm like, damn it, stop. Be original, or no, actually don't do it at all.
Yeah,
but
don't do it at all.
Don't do it at all, but
Be
like
original.
But like, damn, man. Jesus. I know.
Yeah, what a terrible thing. Be original next time, man.
Use your feet or something. I don't know.
Oh, use your feet. He was found with toenails for eyes.
Oh my God.
Listen, I'm with you though. There's something deeply wrong about people wanting to claim the attention. Oh, it was me, I did it. Or people wanting to copy it so they could try to get away with it. There's something just deeply inhuman and super nefarious about that kind of thing. So 100%. But you can't not think of that. Again, this is where I respond to you. I've melted your brain with this show, but then I go, listen, at least we're not the investigators. I do not envy that role where my literal corkboard of red string, that red web up there, proverbially, it's a tangled mess because I'm thinking of every different angle. And they're like, Agent Collins, we need an answer. We need a place we can go. And I'm like, it's all on the table, man. It's always all on the table.
Also, it's just like you don't see the mountain pile of paperwork that would be behind you. You know what I mean?
Yep. Movies make it look a little bit more like clean and breakthroughs coming all the time. But no, dude, it's a severe amount of paperwork to find the one through thread, that breadcrumb.
Yeah.
Now, as I indicated earlier, it wasn't for a few years that more answers came. And that began in August of 1994. A man with the alias of Tony Harris met a man named Brian Smart at an Indianapolis bar. So Harris went home with Smart to swim at a large farmhouse where Smart claimed that he was house sitting. Now, at some point in the night, Smart began strangling Harris with a hose that, as the report goes, it seemed like it was either too long or somehow it was a little too unwieldy for him. And Harris realized what was happening and pretended to pass out. When Smart believed he was unconscious, Harris then opened his eyes, which startled Smart. And whatever happened that night, things went down completely differently as I would have expected. Smart ended up driving Harris back to Indianapolis. Harris believed that Smart was scared of him in some way, and maybe Smart's sitting there going like, well, maybe if I just bring him back to the bar, like he won't tell on me or something. But regardless, wisely, Harris, when left alone and dropped off, he then immediately contacts police. Unfortunately, they could not find the farm that he was at because Harris wasn't expecting to kind of keep an eye on all the clues as they were driving to this farm, and he only had a few visual descriptions to go off of, which just weren't enough for them to find this place. All he knew was that it was somewhere in the northern suburbs. And so his survival of this event is kind of what helped spur on the next step of this investigation, and really honestly opens up the whole thing to actually, I think, give us some answers and get a deeper look into this entire case.
What a wild, like, I'm just riding along.
Dude, I can't imagine being in that situation.
The level of anxiety and the amount of different scenarios that would be flashing through my head in every second.
And you think too, like, oh, I'll just pretend to pass out. Like, that's not going to work all the time.
Nah.
You know, if these people are this aggressive and angry to do something so intimate, to like lay their hands on you in this way or end a human's life, like,
Right.
ugh. So in addition to contacting police, now they're aware of it, they're looking for this farm, unable to find it, but they're at least aware of what's going on. Harris also reaches out to a former police officer and private investigator, Virgil Vandegrift, and he tells him about his experience. Not only that, but also he had a missing friend, Roger Goodlet, who had been missing since July of 1994, which would have been about a month prior. So Vandegrift then is saying, all right, well, let me get into this case. And interestingly, before he really dives in, he's realizing his own string of patterns here. He had been contacted separately by Goodlet's mother, but coincidentally, he was also in contact with yet another mother of another missing man by the name of Alan Broussard. And so now he has 3 different individuals, 1 a surviving victim, 2 mothers from missing individuals that are all contacting him saying, listen, we need your help. The police, unfortunately, have not figured anything out. Can you help us solve it? And 2 of these individuals didn't even know each other, but they were of a similar MO. Once again, they were also gay men of a similar age, 33 and 28, and both from Indianapolis. Both disappeared after planned visits to go to gay bars. Now, this is a very interesting note because, again, it helps close some doors later on. Goodlet was last seen getting into a blue car with Ohio plates. And again, I reference I-70 as an east-west bound interstate, and it goes from Indianapolis to Ohio.
So someone's like, their, I guess, hunting grounds are not where they live.
Right. Like they come in, the
Yeah.
3-hour drive or whatever, do their nefarious deeds, and then ditch the bodies on the way out.
Right. Yeah, they're being thoughtful.
Ugh.
Ugh. It's just, yeah, I know, dude. It's like a shiver. Someone methodical like that, you know?
Mm-hmm. So as Vandegrift began looking into this case, he believes that this is a serial killer, as we know now, obviously, targeting gay men. He began interviewing people at Indianapolis gay bars, that he also spread posters about missing men in the area, just whatever he can do to kind of get information and get boots on the ground. Vandegrift actually told local news source WTHR that police were reluctant to investigate the case. And again, we tried to look into this to get a little bit more clarity. And I don't want to inadvertently disparage the police because, again, we've got hindsight as 2020.
Oh, yeah.
They're seeing different clues. And of course, you can't just draw conclusions because then you might accidentally obfuscate answers that would have otherwise been more clear. But him being a PI, he's got his own theory and he's going after it. And just a year later, in 1995, Harris saw, and this is the man that survived, saw Brian Smart once again at a bar, yelled out to everybody in the room, this man is on top of his game. He says, stop that man and get his license plate.
Oh.
Brian Smart begins fleeing the bar, hops into his car to leave, and guess what? The man had a blue car and Ohio plates.
Oh.
Yeah.
I mean, come on, what are the chances?
We got our perp right here, right? Like,
I would put some money into that.
at least one of them, you know, if you don't subscribe at this time frame to
Right.
serial killers, you
So,
got
yeah.
someone. This episode of Red Web is sponsored by Uncommon Goods. Spark something uncommon this holiday with just the right gift from Uncommon Goods. The busy holiday season is here, Task Force, and Uncommon Goods makes it less stressful with incredible, hand-picked gifts for everyone on your list, all in one spot. I really enjoy Uncommon Goods. I've used it many times in the past. I love how categorized it is, whether you're shopping for the parents, the siblings, the extended friend group, whatever it is, or whatever your budget is. It's all nice and categorized, and I get a lot of stuff myself. I got myself a bagel egg maker, so that way when I have my breakfast sandwich in the morning, I can cook it up super easy and quick, and it's a handmade pottery thing. I love supporting small business. And when you shop at Uncommon Goods, you're doing just that. You're supporting artists and small independent businesses. Many of their handcraft products are made in small batches, so shop now before they sell out for the holiday season. Uncommon Goods looks for products that are high quality, unique, and often handmade or made in the US. They even have gifts that you can personalize. And with every purchase you make at Uncommon Goods, they give back $1 to a nonprofit partner of your choice, and they've donated more than $3 million to date. To get 15% off your next gift, go to uncommongoods.com/redweb. That's uncommongoods.com/redweb for 15% off. Don't miss out on this limited time offer. Uncommon Goods, we're all out of the ordinary. This episode of Red Web is also sponsored by Shady Rays. Forget the boring gifts this year, Task Force. Shady Rays makes finding something special for everyone on your list Super easy. Shady Rays is an independent sunglasses company offering a world-class product rated 5 stars by over 300,000 people. Their shades have durable frames and crystal clear optics, making them the perfect choice this holiday season. And I really enjoy Shady Rays. You've heard me, Task Force, talk about this many times before, but no matter the style I've got going on, whatever I'm doing outside, they have a style and colorway for it. I love going on my walks. You've heard of that before, but even in the cold wintry months, it can still be quite bright, especially if you got that snow rebounding that light into your eyes. Don't get snow blindness. I really do love their Shady Rays options. I like the polarized lenses, and they're very cost effective too. Style plus cost, love it. Every pair, by the way, of shades also comes with a lost or broken protection. If those shades ever disappear or get damaged, Shady Rays will replace them, no questions asked. And with a 30-day return policy, gift givers can shop confidently. So give the gift of quality, style, and worry-free wear this holiday season with Shady Rays. Treat yourself or someone special in your life. Go to shadyrays.com and use promo code RED40, that's RED40, and you're going to get 40% off 2 or more shades. Shadyrays.com, promo code RED40, and try for yourself the shades rated 5 stars by over 300,000 people. So this is where we move into the next phase of the investigation. Vandegrift brought the license plate information to a police officer that he trusted. Not saying he had any sort of conspiracies happening, but he definitely wanted to work closely with someone who could help. That would be a trustworthy source. This was Indianapolis missing persons detective Mary Wilson. The license plate belonged to a man named Herbert Baumeister, or Baumeister, but he also went by Herb. He was a local thrift store owner who lived on Fox Hollow Farm. It appeared that Herb had been using the name Brian Smart as an alias. Pretty dumb if you ask me. Fox Hollow, by the way. Listen, I gotta go for this guy. I gotta give him a gut punch.
Just made me chuckle when it should have. Shouldn't have, you know what I'm saying? You got me on that one. I don't know why.
Yeah, well, gotta keep you on your toes. So Fox Hollow is an 18-acre piece of land in Westfield, Indiana, that the Baumeisters purchased in 1991 per the Encyclopedia of Indianapolis, though, of course, as always, we have other sources claiming it was purchased in 1988. Westfield, just so you know, is about 20 miles due north of Indianapolis. It's a kind of city suburb area, and local news source WRTV actually reported that this family had moved onto Fox Hollow as a property in January of 1992. Remember, and this is a little foreshadowing for what I'm about to explore, but remember that the bodies stopped showing up on I-70 in 91. Maybe it's because of this property. Now, again, I stopped down for just a second to talk about just how eerie this is personally, because where I grew up is perfectly triangulated between Broad Ripple, Westfield, and I-70.
Oh, God.
You could get to I-70 and Westfield in somewhere between 10 to 15 miles, depending on your route, from where I grew up. So this is oddly close to so many places I know.
Yeah, that's no bueno.
I was just a baby at that time, but,
It's too vivid.
Very. Now, Detective Wilson attempted to search Fox Hollow, but the Baumeisters repeatedly denied her requests. Interesting. But listen, there's no warrant, so makes sense. She could not get a search warrant since there was not enough concrete evidence to back up her desired efforts. Eventually, on June 24th or 25th, depending on the source again, in 1996, while Herbert was out of town, his wife Julia actually allowed Detective Wilson and Hamilton County officers to search Fox Hollow. I grew up in Hamilton County, by the way. The couple was going through a divorce at the time, and Herb's thrift stores were closing down, and so maybe it's because of this tension, something happening between this married couple, that she's like, listen, whatever, you can investigate now. A whole couple years later. Now, interestingly, while investigating the property, they discovered multiple human remains.
Oh.
Yeah.
Okay.
It's like immediately they find them. And Julie actually told police that her son had discovered skeletal remains while exploring the wooded part of the estate in 1994. And Herbert claimed, I believe to his wife at this time, he's like, oh, no, those belong to my father. My father's an anesthesiologist. So to be clear, it's not Herbert's dad's bones. It's that he owned these bones because he was, as a doctor, studying them in some way.
Okay. I was like, how is this making sense right now?
Yeah. No, don't worry. My dad's a doctor.
That's why you just stockpiles bodies.
Listen, that's like me in elementary school saying, no, my dad works at Nintendo. I know how Pokemons work.
No, I give free stuff. Nintendo.
Yeah, I'll report you to my dad. He works in Nintendo. So that was his claim to the wife. But now she kind of knows about stuff. So maybe this is also part of why she then says, okay, maybe I let the detective and the officers come on board here. Now, reports say that Julia had forgotten that all of this happened, that her son had found bones on the property until police asked her about it and her husband's possible connections to the string of murders. What an interesting thing to forget until you have tension with him. But right. I leave that, Now, the next month on July 3rd, 1996, Herb was found dead in his car from an apparent suicide in Pinery Provincial Park, 375 miles away up in Ontario, Canada. Now, he left a suicide note that referenced the divorce and his failing businesses, but he did not note anything about the investigation of the murders or any form of confession. The remains found on Fox Hollow were sent to University of Indianapolis for a team of forensic anthropologists to identify them. They did in fact identify at least 11 different individuals among the remains, all of whom were known by their friends and family to be gay men who disappeared in the area. Police connected these deaths to the I-70 Strangler, and post-mortem, after this man has died, they kind of pulled the case all together to say, yep, it was one person that did it. It's very likely this individual. But as I'm going to get to in a little bit, it's not that this person has been post-mortemly, if that's a word, convicted. This crime has never been resolved, but every piece of evidence points towards him. And as we're going to continue to explore, Fox Hollow Farm becomes very much the center of a lot more activity. This case begins to broaden more than we know up until this point. So as I mentioned earlier, the bodies stopped appearing on the rural parts of I-70, giving this illusion that the Strangler had stopped, maybe that another person was in play with this other round of disappearances, etc. But at this point now, police, the investigators, everybody know that instead of leaving them along the highway, at this point the bodies are making it up north to Westfield in the Fox Hollow Farm area, and they're being ditched in the wooded part of the property. To strengthen this theory is the fact that, again, the Baumeisters purchased Fox Hollow around 1991, around the same time that these murders ceased, apparently, I'm doing a lot of air quotes, but seemed to cease in 91. And so that seems to be the year that they shifted to hiding the bodies on the property, and this would then allow this perpetrator to get away with it further. Less attention, less eyewitnesses, less evidence left behind because they're under his watchful supervision on his own property. And in addition to that, it's theorized that a lot of these murders happened in the summer months because his wife and his children would actually be away during that time, vacationing at a nearby lake. And so we do have this robust story being told as to how the crimes went from I-70 to Fox Hollow Farm.
That is, that's like a double life. That's insane.
That's a deep double life too.
Oh my goodness.
Like in every form of it.
Yeah, I can't even, oh goodness. The crazy thing is that if he just stopped maybe like a murder or two ago, might have just gotten away with it, right? Like clean cut.
Might have.
The whole hiding bodies on your own property. Yeah, that just makes it so insanely hard to track down because where's the trail? You know what I mean?
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
If he was using different cars, like renting different cars or whatever, like that would have been even harder. You know what I mean?
Yeah. I mean, that's a great point. If he was hopping cars and doing things I guess the car could technically be traced back to a rental facility with, you'd have to have your ID down on paper, but
true, yeah.
But still, there's a lot of ways to cover your tracks, and you're not wrong. What's scary is that he really could have gotten away with it if it weren't for, Tony Harris, which again is an alias, surviving an encounter and then running back into him and then kind of pinning the blue car Ohio plates to this person. And then the PI that he contacted, in addition to other, like a lot of things perfectly lined up, and the investigation unfolded properly. Like there's a lot of lucky reasons why, with a lot of effort, this person was found. Because you're right, the scary part is this person could have simply vanished into the night, and we've seen so many cases that.
Yeah.
It's terrifying.
It's terrifying. You just need to be a little less greedy and could have just gotten away with it for possibly the rest of their lives, which is an insane thought.
Yeah. Now you're giving advice again over there.
Well,
listen, you're saying change it up, be unique.
Don't jot these down. This isn't any kind of handbook whatsoever.
But yeah, man, this is a wild case. And as I kind of said, while technically Herb Baumeister has not been confirmed as the culprit, he hasn't in a postmortem world been convicted in any way. He took his own life before he could be interrogated. The evidence is so stacked against him, whether it be from eyewitness testimonies to the on-property evidence, it would take an incredibly wild twist to change investigators' minds. So again, like I kind of teased, this feels like the closest we're going to get to a closed case, to an answer that Red Web will explore.
It does, because also, the big thing is just like they took their own lives. And it's not to say that maybe this was someone that was dealing with a lot of anxiety or depression, and then, this pressure from an outside source is what caused it. But aside from that, you'd think that, like, why would you do that if you were innocent? You know what I mean?
It feels like I'm not sorry I did it. I'm sorry I was caught. And now
I'm going to go out my way. I'm not going to take an in type of thing.
Right. So a lot of reasons drove this person to not want to face the responsibilities that they gave themselves, not want to face the repercussions that they were responsible for, I should say. Now, the case doesn't really end here. What I love about some of the cases we explore across Red Web is when there is a modern, and this is relatively modern already, but when there's a current day addition to the investigation.
Right.
And interestingly, after the initial victims' identifications in the 90s, Coroner Jeff Jellison reopened the case to continue DNA testing in 2022, so quite recently. Jellison had been contacted that year by a family member of Alan Livingston, who was yet another gay man who went missing back in 1993, a 27-year-old man who fit that MO, and this family was seeking closure because, yeah, we know about Baumeister, we know about these remains, but they still hadn't had answers regarding their own loved one, which then led to renewed testing across the board. Jellison was able to match one of the DNA profiles with Livingston's mother, Sharon, in 2023, and this made him the confirmed 9th victim identified. According to local news WTHR, Sharon felt confident that her son was in fact a victim of Herb Baumeister, but it was her nephew who had reached out to Jellison for the closure to be certain. Now, today, remains from up to 25 victims have been found on the Fox Hollow property, though not all of them have been identified. So this is where a part of the case is still ongoing and active. They're investigating the remains that have been found. Forensic investigators are still working with nearly 10,000 plus fragments of human remains.
Oh my God, that's absolutely just morbid.
Dude, it's heartbreaking knowing that there was a lot of people that went missing. There's some closure for some families, but now it could be more than double, almost triple the amount of initial victims that have been killed and left just in the woods of this property. And families to this day are still seeking closure for family members that they lost back in the 90s. It's absolutely wild and sickening.
Yeah, I can't imagine being a family member that thinks that this was the person that caused the disappearance and the murder of a loved one, a beloved one.
Mm-hmm.
And then also just waiting to see if they get dug up on this piece of property. Like, what a sad situation,
Yeah. In fact, this case is still ongoing in that sense. I feel like the reason why Red Web, we don't talk about a lot of very modern cases. We don't want to interfere or inadvertently spread misinformation for hot cases that are still ongoing. The thing is, the main thing remaining about this one is identifying victims, and that's why we felt comfortable approaching this one, because it helps, raise awareness for some cases that perhaps task force can help find closure to. But of course, never get involved when you don't know anything. But in fact, even this year, January 2024, Manuel Resendez was actually identified as a victim. He was 34, and he also disappeared the same day as Livingston. And so, for better or worse, for the sake of closure, for families, these victims are still being identified, and at least these families have answers.
Right. Yeah, it's an unfortunate one.
Yeah. But what's interesting is there are current day owners of Fox Hollow Farm, the Graves family. They continue to inform investigators on any remains that they come across, which is wild to own a property knowing that this is what happened here and that there is the non-zero chance that you're mowing the lawn someday or going about your business or maybe putting another pool in. I don't know how many pools you have in Indiana, and you dig something up.
And there's a good chance that it's not like an animal's remains, but an actual human remains. Yeah, I wouldn't want to. Yeah, no, I'm not.
That's yucky.
I'm not going to deal with that, no.
Yeah. Now, this is usually something I'd say in the closing of an episode, but there's another segment I want to explore that starts to move into the paranormal. So before we do that, though, I do want to give one kind of closing piece. If you believe Task Force or anybody listening that a loved one may have been the victim of Herb Baumeister, you're encouraged to reach out to Hamilton County Coroner's Office at 317-770-4415. Again, as always, show a lot of respect. I don't want Task Force members just to go calling off willy-nilly. I know you won't, but I just want to put that energy out there. But it's one of the few times that we have a number, a website, an email for Task Force members to get involved if there is information that you have. This episode of Red Web is also sponsored by BetterHelp. This month is all about gratitude, and there's one person we don't often get to thank enough. Spoiler alert, it's ourselves. It's you, Task Force. It's sometimes hard to remind ourselves that we are trying our best, trying to make sense of everything going on in this wild world, and that isn't always easy. Here's a reminder to send some thanks to the people in your life, including yourself. In my journey in therapy, I know how daunting it can be to approach the topic, to find the right person who can speak to your specific needs and feel like you're being heard, to feel like you're making progress, and that's what I appreciate about BetterHelp. They help you cross that gap more easily, helping you begin your therapy journey process. And if you're thinking about starting therapy, give BetterHelp a try. It's entirely online. It's designed to be convenient, flexible, and suited to your specific schedule. All you have to do is fill out a brief questionnaire to get matched with a licensed therapist, and you can switch therapists at any time for no additional charge, which is essential in this journey. Let the gratitude flow with BetterHelp. Visit betterhelp.com/redweb today to get 10% off your first month. That's BetterHelp, HELP.com/redweb. But with that, this does move into the more modern times, more of a paranormal element, and centers around Robert and Vicki Graves, who purchased Fox Hollow Farms in May of 2009. This is one of those rare instances, almost like the Villisca axe murders that we covered about a month and a half ago, where a very bloody true crime case moves into the territory of paranormal. And there's many schools of thought. You can be cynical and say this has to do with money making and attention, which are all well founded by many stories out there. But then there's also the fact that many believers think that when you have such heightened emotion, such visceral kind of energies like this, that it leaves behind a residual. And so that's kind of where this comes from.
I was like, what is the paranormal angle here?
Yeah.
But like post, kind of like post paranormal.
Yeah. And again, that's why I wanted to address it up top. I don't want to be like overly cynical, but I would feel yucky if I just turned this into a ghost story at the end of it. But there's been a lot of encounters from the Graves family specifically that I think are kind of interesting, but as always, take it with a grain of salt. Because almost immediately after the discovery of human remains on Fox Hollow Farms, rumors began to spread of it being haunted. The Graves' actually first few months on the estate seemed to be pretty uneventful as far as the paranormal goes, until one day, Vicki was cleaning when the vacuum suddenly shut off. She's not thinking anything of it. She plugs it back in because she saw the plug had fallen out of the socket, and she goes back to work vacuuming the house, and again it shuts off. This time she was only a few feet away from the socket, so it couldn't have been that the cord was tense and that she'd gone too far away and accidentally unplugged it. So she again plugs it back in the wall, and this time, almost very violently, the plug flies out of the wall and shoots across the room, and Vicki reportedly felt like there was a presence in the house. Rob told local news source Current about this incident and added that it, quote, happens routinely. He also claimed that they have to announce when they need to vacuum because for some reason, the energies left behind on this property are activated, maybe made anxious, or just are more active when the vacuum is on.
Interesting.
Very interesting.
I wonder, we haven't gotten there yet, or maybe we don't get there, but I'm wondering like if the other foot drops and it's like they trying to monetize this in some way.
Right. That's why I wanted to properly close out the investigative true crime element of this. But I am also lightly interested because you know me, I'm skeptical, but I'm desperate for proof. And so as we explore these stories, I'm looking for, is there anything that they wouldn't know about the case that pops up in these stories that kind of connects them, like to say that are these spirits of any victims? Are they the spirits of the perpetrator? Or is this completely irrelevant? I don't know. So another man, Joe LeBlanc, was co-workers with Rob, and he moved onto Fox Hollow property when he needed a place to live closer to work. His first night on the estate, he had vivid nightmares and felt like he needed to run from someone or something. And when he woke up, he attempted to run for his life. He hit his head on the bed frame. And that's kind of where that energy ended, that story. In another instance, Vicky saw someone wearing a red shirt in a wooded area of the estate, which then drew her attention to the wooded forest where, now that we know, a lot of the bodies had been found. When she approached this figure, she realized that below the hips where the legs should have been was just empty space. This person seemed to be floating in the air. Startled by this image, she then called out to the figure, and then it seemed to vanish when she did so. And this is where I started to want to connect the dots to see if there's anything here, like if any of the victims had been wearing a red shirt or what have you, but nothing of that ilk had shown up, at least from any of the testimonies, eyewitness encounters, or remains that were found. No red shirts to be seen. So Vicky actually told her husband Rob about the sighting, and so he then also went to go check it out. Now, it is worth noting, and this does kind of make it a little bit more relevant, that due to the history that we all now very much know about Fox Hollow, they routinely get visitors, and they had trouble with so-called serial killer enthusiasts, people that would want to come see the property, poke around, see if they found anything, whatever, which is a little bit disrespectful to just be showing up on the property because you think you have the right to do that because you're morbidly fascinated.
Yeah, I mean, that's why, I don't know, man. Like, unless that came at a really good price. I mean, no, even for me, I'm just trying to say, like, for them, the reason that they purchased it, maybe it was a good price or something. But, like, that's just too many issues that come along with that place.
Yeah. And listen, there's always going to be someone who's willing to look past the history and say, that's in the past, we're moving into the future. But yeah, it's this kind of X factor of people showing up. And so that's what Rob is after. He's thinking she might have thought she saw some sort of spirit. I think that this is just another ne'er-do-well kind of stomping around the property, being a little disrespectful. So let me go check it out. What's interesting though is LeBlanc, who's also living on this property, claims that he also saw the same red shirt wearing figure. And when Rob then went out to the woods to see if this person was still around, he couldn't find anyone where Vicky had claimed to seen the figure. And it's quite a big property, so they would either have to be hiding very well or really hoofing it to get out of sight and not leaving really any evidence behind for Rob to see. There was another night where they were walking their dog alone one night, and the dog actually took off into the woods, chasing after yet another vision of a person wearing a red shirt. Now the dog runs out of sight, and this red shirt person also kind of ends up out of sight. And when looking for the dog, he ran into the red shirt figure once again, which kind of startled him, and he then ran back to the house with the dog in tow. And that's kind of where the red shirt figure ends. I'm just desperate for answers there. I'm almost like, is this a spirit drawing you to yet another undiscovered set of remains? Is this a victim who hadn't been identified yet? Or is this just kind of their story?
See, that's just too many variables. You know, when you think about it, where it's just like, yeah, is it a random enthusiast that's just on the property? Is it a spirit? I don't know, man. I mean, who's to say there isn't someone that's inspired and then tries to want to do the same thing, but then goes to the same area? Like there's just so many variables.
Yeah, your mind can really start to wander. But that's the biggest, most continuous encounter that they've all shared, this person with the red shirt, in addition to the continuous ongoing vacuum activity. But there was another night where LeBlanc was woken up by a loud knocking on his door. The knocking is getting louder and louder, more impatient, even though he's calling out to himself like, hey, I'm coming, whatever. The dog begins growling at the door because, I mean, it seems the dog's hearing it too. And of course, when he opens the door, no one is there. There are, in the end, a few rooms in the Fox Hollow estate that Vicky has said that she does not like to go into, one of them being Rob's bathroom. So paranormal investigators and psychics have been through this house to look at it, whether it be to attempt to cleanse it or figure out what might be happening, and several of them have claimed that this particular room, the bathroom, is a portal or a place through which ghosts can enter the living realm.
Oh, hell no.
Yeah. In the bathroom of all places, a man's sanctuary.
Yeah, you can't take a dump in peace.
But Rob seems to back this claim up by saying, quote, Vicky told me that before anybody else said a word. So basically, Vicky's experience in this room validates others coming in. And there is something interesting to me when somebody who doesn't know about a situation comes in and is able to kind of figure it out without having that insight. But again, you know, it can be a charade. I'm still left wanting something more tangible.
Yeah, something more tangible.
Yeah.
I think it, puts together a really enticing story. And, I mean, we're sitting here talking about it. I didn't think we'd have a paranormal kind of perspective or kind of like take on it. But I can see, posts like, I live on this property now and I sense and see weird things.
Yeah. I think the last kind of little blurb here, and I was completely startled that this turned into a ghost story as well, because the case itself is already so morbid. It feels like just a weird juxtaposition, because a lot of the ghost stories we've encountered in the past have a little bit more of a light flair to them. Right. They usually don't start with a very vivid, detailed story about actual and recent strangulations of all things. In one instance, a friend of Joe was visiting, and he didn't believe Fox Hollow was haunted whatsoever. And he actually says that he witnessed Joe get pulled underwater in the pool by nothing. There was nothing in the pool. Something pulled him under, and that really shook him. And the pool is the place, if this is the same property, where Harris was attempted to be strangled by a hose. I don't know if it's the same farmland or not, but again, it was north, and it was some sort of piece of farm suburb property. So there could be some latent connection there. And then the last piece comes from Joe as well, who believes the farm is haunted by none other than Herb Baumeister himself, rather than any of the victims. He says he has an EVP recording, and when he asked who was there, who this entity, this spirit on the property might have been, all he got was the answer, quote, the married one. But in closing, the I-70 Strangler case is yet another example of someone getting away with nefarious deeds for far too long, and where evidence is just a little bit too thin for authorities to properly get involved. It's easily noted with hindsight, but it's unfortunate to see just how close some of the survivors were to identifying their would-be murderer. While technically unresolved, I think the Indiana community feels safer knowing the likely culprit has been identified, thanks to tremendous efforts by private investigator Virgil Vandegrift. And that is the case of the I-70 Strangler.
What a wild ride in terms of like how intimate the killer was with his victims, and how circumstantial was it they got caught, and then the living of the double life, and the foresight to put the bodies on the property. And then I go, okay, that must be it. No, then it's like the family that bought the property, and they're still finding bones, just around their property. And then now there's a supernatural, like this had meat on the bone.
Yeah, this one kept going. And man, this is like, I always say when we do a true crime episode, especially with a serial killer, it's both frustrating when you feel like you don't have enough information, or something just slipped out of sight, or skulls were lost in the investigation, or you have people who claim it was me when it obviously wasn't. That stuff gets frustrating when you have just not enough meat. But when you have so much meat that you're painting a vivid image like this person was organized, meticulous, intentional, and then this level of crime, like, I don't want to soften any crime, but like, to shoot somebody is more of an instant action than to sit there and grab onto somebody like that. And I don't know, man, there's something so grotesquely visceral about this whole case. And yeah, again, I was blown away that there was any sort of paranormal angle. And it does feel, like I said before, a little out of place, but I wanted to explore that a little bit because, again, I'm just very curious if there's any relevance to this case that kind of popped up. You know, how you have this red shirt.
It should be completely out of place where it shouldn't even be brought up. But like, no, it has its place in this. And that's weird that it does.
Yeah. And almost like, again, I'm skeptic, but I am a want to believe kind of person. But yeah, so that's been the I-70 Strangler. And honestly, no other potential suspects have been explored because, again, even though it's not technically resolved, this feels very firmly to be like, all right, it was that person, when they bought this property, the crime shifted there. I don't know how else you cut it. This feels like, again, the closest to an answer we're going to get.
And I'll take it because, that's something you don't get on Red Web.
No.
Or just these mysteries in general, you know what I mean? It's not something you get, so.
For better or worse, we triangulate the stuff that's like, you don't have an answer. So we're setting ourselves up for constant frustration.
Right.
But it's an interesting case nonetheless. And with that said, Task Force, thank you all so much for listening. I hope you enjoy the coming holiday season. Again, we have merch over at store.redwebpod.com, as well as our Patreon page where we have lots of bonus content and this podcast ad-free. And of course, our exclusive bonus show, Movie Club, where Fredo and the others, this whole crew, walk through various horror movies from classic to crap, and we have a great time. We just put out Chopping Mall.
Yep. Yeah, we're kind of in the crap era, so it's fun right now.
We are deep in the crap era. That one was a lot of fun. So if you want to check that out, go to patreon.com/redweb. And with that said, Fredo, I'll see you right back here next Monday for yet another mystery.